So I'm going to speak to the art therapy program at the NICO, or National Intrepid Center of Excellence. The National Intrepid Center of Excellence is a facility for the treatment of traumatic brain injury and underlying psychological health concerns in active duty military service members. So these are complex cases that aren't really healing as well as we would hope they would in the conventional military outpatient treatment setting. And they come to us and they're engaged in a vast array of different modalities, and they interact with different providers from about 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day for 4 weeks, excluding the weekends. And in those 4 weeks, they are involved in more clinical encounters than they would be for, I think, about 1.5 years is what we're averaging in the conventional outpatient setting. And they use conventional medicine as well as alternative and integrative is the word now, medicine to include the creative arts therapies. So we do use a holistic model, and as you can see here, there's an integration of the mind and the body when someone is engaging in art therapy, and it occupies a very essential role in the treatment of trauma, and you will see many examples of this in a moment. This is the lovely studio. I am so fortunate to be able to work in a setting like this. And for those who came up with the idea for NICO, the vision of NICO, to design it so that it would include an art therapy studio and a music therapy studio. And if there are any art therapists or art therapy students in the room, you know how important it is to have a very safe space where both therapy can occur, but also, as you can see with the gallery, the hanging system, etc., it makes it very easy for the service member to walk in and feel like, okay, other people have done this before and feel inspired to create. And so I just wanted to point out how important that is. So our model, I'm very fortunate as well, not only in the space, but in leadership's recognition of how important it is to incorporate and integrate the creative arts therapies into our model. So it is the standard of care at NICO. And what I mean by that is at some facilities, they say, are you interested in art? Maybe you would like something like art therapy. At NICO, you are introduced to it no matter what. So the service members are taken through the 4 weeks, and they're automatically exploring things like art therapy. And their first week, they engage in mask making, which I'll talk more about later. And the second week, they are introduced to writing in both an expressive setting and in creative writing workshops. And then throughout the 4 weeks, they're also engaged in music therapy groups and individual settings. And so it's very nice for them to be able to, when you think about advocacy for what's working, choose which modality is working maybe best for them and kind of focus on that, or maybe it's all of the above. Our music therapist has done a wonderful job of kind of, I like to say, putting a nice ribbon on it. She'll take a service member's mask and use it as a CD cover, take the writing that they've created and then put it to music, and then incorporate all of the above and hand them a nice kind of closing project as they leave. So when you talk about the integration of care, that's a very good example. So I'm going to talk a little bit about also how this operates in the brain. So in order for someone to really master trauma, they have to access the nonverbal right hemisphere of the brain, and art therapy does that, and then communicate with the left hemisphere, which is more of your kind of speech and language area of the brain, to gain cognitive and affective mastery. Just to add some more of kind of the neuroimaging research that's been done, Van der Kolk, among others, have found that there's a shutdown in the Broca's area of the brain, which is, like I said, the speech and language area of the brain. It's the left frontal lobe. In contrast, art making, it actually accesses the parts of the brain that encode trauma. So it's the kind of the right hemisphere of the brain. And once a service member has created artwork and processed kind of, or created this concrete image of what they are feeling or thinking, and they apply words to what they've created, they're then able to reintegrate both hemispheres of the brain, which is what happens in a healthy individual. And I'm going to actually show you a service member talking about this, not quite in those terms, not in scientific terms, but in his own words about how art therapy really benefited him. The first question is, what really stood out to you as you were coming through the 4-week program?
Did any stand out to you or any of your favorite?
Art, by far.
What did you do in art therapy?
Made a mask.
And how did that affect your treatment?
It was able. Damn it. It allowed me to put 23 years of PTSD and TBI stuff together in one place that it's never happened before. Sorry. No one was able to figure it out because the way conventional medicine works in the Navy, the Army, you see this guy, you go see this guy, you go see this guy. They never talk. This is where this is awesome, because you come here, they talk every day. So this person talks, this person talks. They have notes. So they send me to art therapy, and I go in there and I give them a mask, and you sort of just zone out into the mask. You zone out into the drawing. And for me, it just released the block. So I was able to do it. And then when I looked at it after 2 days, I was like, holy crap, here's the picture, here's the key, here's the puzzle. And then from there, it just soared. I mean, from there, my treatment just went, out of sight, because they were like, Kurt, explain this. And for the first time in 23 years, I could actually talk about stuff openly to like anybody. I could talk to you about it right now if I wanted to, because it unlocked it. It's just amazing.
So as I said, a very eloquent way of kind of putting how art therapy unlocked for him things he couldn't talk about prior, which may be connected to the brain portion that I just discussed. So this is a very abbreviated example of the goals that we are addressing as we go into each individual session with the service member. Excuse me. And in a moment, you'll see by a case study how we address some of these goals. And you'll see that art therapy, also by this case study, gains access to the traumatic images. It uses image-based therapy to integrate split off and fragmented traumatic memories that often result in flashbacks and nightmares. So the case study I'm going to present to you, the service member was experiencing some very bad flashbacks and nightmares, and they were actually haunting him in both his waking and his sleeping life. And the case study is called BFib, or Bloody Face and Bunker. This is a very high-ranking officer. He was in charge of hundreds of men and women, and there was a mortar attack on his base in Iraq. He was wounded during the mortar attack and had to crawl into a bunker. And as he laid on his side, he was conscious but obviously dazed. In front of him was an image of a bloody face. And he realized that the face wasn't real, but he couldn't understand what it was or what it meant. It was confusing, it was scary. And he kept this face a secret for 7 years. He wasn't able to tell anybody. And partly because, obviously, the stigma of mental health issues and a fear of losing his job, and then also because he really just didn't understand where it was coming from. He didn't know how to explain it or describe it. So he came to NICO, and as he was coming through on the tour of NICO, he saw the masks hung on the wall, and immediately he said, I thought of BFib. And initially, he was a little too scared to try and process that through the art making, but through some of the other integrative modalities, such as acupuncture, he realized they were really benefiting him and said, well, maybe I should give this a try. So he came to me, and it was a pretty intense session. He was, you could tell, hesitant at first, but after an hour, he was able to create BFib. So what was interesting about BFib was as he created him, he went from what was kind of a psychological image to an actual concrete physical form. So he wasn't just this thing that he was imagining in his head anymore. He had a physical presence. I mean, even as he went to leave that first session, he said, take care of him. So he's embodied this mask literally with this image that he's been seeing. And then as he came through the 4 weeks, he told me, he's like, when I think of BFib now, I don't think about him as in my mind anymore. I think about him sitting in the art therapy studio, kind of waiting for me to come back and finish this project. We actually decided to contain him further. So you have the containment of the actual art therapy space, and then we found a perfectly shaped box, obviously, to put BFib in. I think it was initially like a box of nuts, and we split it up amongst the staff and then put BFib inside of it. He painted it yellow to shed, to represent how he felt like he was shedding light on who BFib was and why he was seeing him. You see it for those of you who study trauma, and you know how trauma is kind of this speechless terror frozen in one's mind. You see this amazing magazine cutout that he found frozen in time. And then on the outside, he painted it to show that he had begun to open up. And you can't see the other sides, but it's things like happier, beginning to talk, that kind of collaging. He actually left this in the studio. He wasn't ready to bring that home yet. He liked knowing it was safe in that space. And then he told us that after leaving the NICO in the following year and a half, he only saw BFib 2 times. So this went from multiple times a day to only twice, and then both times he said it didn't make him anxious at all. So that's a pretty big change. He actually returned. Now, this is not a traditional way of treating the NICO patients. We normally don't get to see them long term, but we have a few kind of test models. We want to see how that works if we're able to have them for follow-up. And he returned and said, I'm still seeing some things, including the exact moment where there was the mortar round hit. And I'd like to recreate that too, because BFib helped. So, maybe this will help too. So he came back multiple times to create this moment. And you'll see in the painting, or you maybe can't see, but there's dirt from the actual base in Iraq, and there's also shrapnel that was removed from his body that he was just kind of keeping in his house somewhere. So he was able to take these things and find a very symbolic home for them, and then assimilate it into kind of his life. And he actually took this painting home and hung it. So that was a big step. It was something that's happened to me that I can be proud of, that I've turned into this for him. I think he was pretty proud of the painting. And same situation, he would leave, and during the flashbacks, he said, instead of feeling anxious or scared, I was thinking about how I need to adjust the painting. How do I adjust the painting to better match that exact moment that I remember? He was still undergoing acupuncture treatments, and at this time, there's a treatment called Dragons that brings up a lot of kind of subconscious imagery and memories. So he was seeing a lot of faces during this, and one of them was a friend that was killed in action prior to the mortar injury. And the friend, he actually put in his stead on a mission when he had to go do something else, because I said he was higher ranking. So he felt a lot of guilt surrounding that. And the last moment that he saw him, his friend was giving him a thumbs up and driving away in the vehicle before the IED hit. And so he actually brought in a glove, the same type of glove his friend was wearing, and I sat there for about 30 minutes with a thumbs up. And he recreated that. And I believe he went on to even give it to either his family or some people that knew the friend well. I also like to talk about the mask making, and as you can see, there's already this idea of how mask making can help with kind of divulging the self. I mean, obviously it hides one's identity, but it also, in my case, I think it actually brings it out. So throughout the 5 years that I've been at NICO, I think over 800 masks have been created, and we've collected images of all of them. They're uploaded into the patient charts, and we have this a protocol to actually start to explore the thematic themes, or the themes that are coming up, and conduct a thematic analysis on the mask images themselves. This is a recurring theme. It's a split sense of self. So, you've got war and peace in this mask, probably the one that occurs the most. And that is actually going to happen with a collaboration with Drexel University. We're really excited about it. We're going to be able to correlate what we find, service members are really focused on with data that we've collected throughout the 4 weeks. So, we'll know how they came in, what they looked like, and the image of them as they left, how much they improved. And I don't know, is creating a mask that's kind of surrounding trauma, will that help them more throughout the 4 weeks? Or is there a certain branch that's depicting a specific type of mask. So we might find some interesting things out about this particular population. I'm going to just run through some of the themes that we've been seeing. This last one I want to touch briefly on. When the families come to join the service members at NICO, they are educated, taken through education classes. They're able to sit in on some of the therapy, and we do try to incorporate the family into art therapy sessions. So we'll have family art therapy, and you wouldn't believe it, but all three of these masks were made in different groups. So it's not like they were sitting there and chose the same color schemes. It just kind of happened. So definitely something going on with caregivers and a nurturing kind of sense about them. And in the very final week, we conduct a montage painting session. And it's during the session, it's very fun for me that I get to see a complete change in the service members, not just their affects. I mean, they're able to walk in, they're brighter, and they're able to sit down and feel very comfortable with the materials, but also in what they create. So this service member is creating symbolically how he felt he changed through the 4 weeks, and you can tell he's walking through the door, which symbolizes NICO, and then how he leaves is obviously standing upright and proud. The atmosphere has changed, and he's feeling much better. So we love to see that. We're of course most interested, though, we want to make sure that we understand what's happening on that next canvas. How does continuity work? What's going to happen next? And so, fortunately, with our partners at the NEA, we are exploring ways to continue to work on outreach and expansion. We're going to be expanding into multiple different military treatment facilities across the nation. We also were fortunate enough to, some of you may have seen the National Geographic article that was this past February. If not, you can go online and you can hear some of the service members actually talk about both their art therapy experiences. They're wearing their masks in their home bases. It's very, very touching. And then also kind of just their experiences with war. And so we are very interested in how we can spread the the healing through the arts. So it's pretty exciting, and thank you so much for taking the time to come here tonight. Thank you.